sounds of Stan Getz here on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in the desert. Welcome back inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is hour number 2 of the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk. It's just wonderful to bring back to the program a dear friend and a guy who's just opened his heart. And, as he's explained to the world and to me, if you take care of the music will take care of you. Todd Barkan, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, bright moments to you, Jake.
How you doing, my man?
Just trying to make the world safe for bebop.
I know, and that's where we should pick up, because I wanted to ask you about the first time that you encountered Mr. Stan Getz.
Well, as Zoot Sims once so wisely observed, Stan Getz was a nice bunch of guys.
Yeah.
Stan Getz really was one of the most vivid illustrations to me of the very, very razor-thin line between artistic and autistic, in that he could really change on a dime. He could be one of the nicest guys in the world, or he could be one of the most difficult and almost seem evil. Although he wasn't evil, he just mainly it had to do with the mind-altering substances that would bring out the less sanguine elements of his personality. I mean, I first started working with Stan. I met him actually in the '60s when I was with Rahsaan. I met him in New York through Rahsaan Roland Kirk and Jack Whittemore in the '60s. But I first started to get to work to him. I had the privilege and the honor to work with Stan Getz, and really start to become close friends with Stan Getz in 1972 when he first worked there with his band at the Keystone Korner in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And Stan Getz and I became very close friends. In fact, for a few years, he even lived in San Francisco, and I got to know Stan quite well, the pros and cons, but I counted him as a very close friend, and he once said that Keystone Korner was the greatest jazz club that he knew in the world at that time. They made that statement in the late '70s. So he played there, I would say, about 15 times during the 11 years that the Keystone Korner was open, and so I got to know him quite well. And then, of course, I stayed in his home back here in New York, where I'm talking to Jake now. In New York, he lived at a place that was actually originally owned by, or owned at one time by, Washington Irving.
Was it
the Headless Horseman guy?
The Gershwin Mansion, was it?
Yeah, it was called Irvington on Hudson.
I did.
Irvington.
Dig.
Washington Irving
Yes.
lived there.
Yes.
The famed author.
You lived
before George
there?
Gershwin.
You lived there.
No, I stayed with him.
I'm sorry, you stayed there.
I stayed with him. I would stay 2 or 3 weeks at a time. In fact, it was Stan this was very soon after he first worked at the Keystone. I think in the winter of '73 into '74, I actually wound up staying back there with Stan for about a week, and Joao Gilberto, who would later work at the Keystone Korner with Stan, was actually staying in Stan Getz's attic apartment in Irvington. But we didn't really know he was there. I mean, we used to call him the spooky elf because he kept to himself, and he was a cute little guy, but we never would see him. He'd keep to himself up in the attic with his, he smoked a lot of herb and drank a lot of very strong Brazilian coffee and chanted to Mayor Baba. But that's when I met Joao Gilberto in Stan Getz's home. It was New Year's Eve morning. The new year was still not yet light out, but it was the new year, and I couldn't sleep, and I went down to get a little snack in the kitchen, very capacious kitchen that Stan had there, and all of a sudden, little Joao came in, the little guy we called the spooky elf. Very sweet guy, though. Very shy, very tiring, very, very sweet in his own way. He used to call me Tadji, which is a Portuguese word for a chocolate. Say Tadji. And so he came in, and then he got a good vibe. We started a kind of just a very rough. He didn't speak much English. I spoke no Portuguese, so it was not a real fluid conversation. But somehow he got a good vibe, and he went up and brought down his guitar and started to serenade me for New Year's Day. And pretty soon, almost the entire household was down there in the kitchen, and that was my first experience with João Gilberto. And he kept playing this song, which is on the Getz Gilberto album from the Keystone, which I fell in love with. It's called E Preciso Perdoar, or however you pronounce it in correct Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. But it means E Preciso Perdoar means, and excuse my bad pronunciation, it means it is necessary to forgive. So later on, I would have to forgive Stan many times, because just his behavior was quite, he'd get a little out for one reason or another.
Well, this is something that's important. Johnny Mandel, I just came back from Los Angeles. He, like, almost verbatim to what you said. He said Stan, not to him, Stan was evil. There were times where he was evil. He would someone was cleaning up and trying to get off of heroin, and instead of paying them for the gig, he'd give them a bag of heroin. Astrid Gilberto, when she sang charmingly, on that album that became a pop hit, he made it clear that he wanted her to have 0 credits on the album. Nowhere, maybe get paid for the session, but can you talk about a specific...
Well, yeah, I was getting to that. I think that's why I originally said in this conversation the thin line between artistic and autistic.
Yeah.
Stan straddled that like a colossus. I mean, he could be the nicest guy and give you the shirt off his back one moment, and then be one of the most evil, cantankerous, even malicious and pernicious individuals in the world the next. I mean, he went back and forth.
Can you give an example?
A pendulum. And I experienced that many, 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 many times. One of the most classic was in the late 70s when Stan was playing there with his outstanding quartet with Billy Hart on drums and Clint Houston on bass and Joanne Barkan on piano. And he had bought some what's called Dilaudid, which is also called Housewives Heroin. It's a morphine derivative that he had bought from a less than reputable pharmacy, which happened to also mislabel it. So there was twice as much dope in the Dilaudid. He would melt it down and shoot it up, and he actually overdosed on my stage right there in the middle of the Girl from Ipanema. He go ba 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 ba, and he rolled up into a little ball of atrophied protoplasm underneath the piano that Joanne Barkan was playing, and Billy Hart and I had to pick him up like with one elbow each, and pick up this big medicine ball Getz and take him out into the alley where the paramedics were, who injected him with the same thing that Prince got when he landed in that airplane emergency landing in Illinois. It was called Narcan, and that would neutralize all the opiates in his system. And he woke up like he'd just gotten out of the shower. Now, we had just saved his life. He probably would have died right there on stage. So they gave him the Narcan, the paramedics that I had called, and we saved his life. And he woke like a deer in the headlights. And he looks at me and he says, unlike the deer in the headlights, he was very articulate, and he said, "Todd, where's my bread?"
I
Now,
cannot.
that's not the most appreciative greeting I've ever received from somebody for whom you just saved their life. And I said, Stan, we just gave all the bread back to all the customers because you OD'd on stage, and I had to refund all the money to the people because you OD'd. Well, where's my money? I said, well, there is no money, and I can't pay you for tonight because we didn't, in fact, I'm going to have to dock you a substantial amount for the week because it just, it really killed my Saturday night business. And that's the biggest night of the week, out of which it provides a good amount of the revenue with which I'm able to pay the band. Now, I only wound up docking him $1,000 for the whole week. But in the meantime, he says, well, take me back to the hotel. So the doorman and I personally put him in my car, and took him back to his hotel, which was on Union Square, the Hyatt on Union Square in San Francisco, for all you geography fans. And we get into his fancy suite overlooking Union Square, and he immediately bolts into the bathroom, puts a bunch more Dilaudid on a spoon, heats it up, shoots it up again, staggers out into the bedroom right in front of us, and passes out again, OD'd again. So we had to call the same paramedics, and unfortunately the same two guys showed up who had just been with us in Emery Lane next to the club when we saved his life the first time. Same two paramedics. They took one look at me and they said, Barkan, if we ever see you again with this schmuck, you're both going to jail.
Jesus.
That's all there is to it. Where's this shit? I said, it's probably in the bathroom. So they went and confiscated his stuff immediately. They shot him up with some Narcan immediately and took his shit and left. And gave us some paperwork for having confiscated the dope and everything else. And
let me
and
just,
I had to sign for personal responsibility for Getz. And Getz got up and he started being belligerent with me. So there. And with the guy, Waleed, who was my doorman. Fortunately, Waleed was a very tough guy. He just passed away. He was one of the legendary jazz figures of the Bay Area, Waleed Richardson. So, Waleed Rahman Richardson. But anyway, so he starts getting belligerent, and he makes a play to go get on the phone and cop some more dope. We had to pull the plug out of the wall, so he couldn't call anybody and take the phone out of the room. And in the meantime, I had to call his wife back in Irvington. She came out and got him and took him up to Hazleton, Minnesota, where he went through some rehab shortly after that.
Brother Barkan, you're.
But this is a good example of his evil side.
You were. Exactly. Now, what's interesting is that what's really fascinating is that Bill Crow, the bass player, we're talking 20 years before, literally after a gig, Stan wants to go to a party. He's downstairs. He's shooting heroin. He ODs. They have to give him artificial respiration. He comes to, and he says, get off my clothes. You're making them dirty. And then he says... they said, Stan, you were dead. Okay. And he said, yeah, you know what? I know I was higher than all of you guys. Now, my point is this. I read Donald Magan's book, and that keeling over on the bandstand at the Keystone is in that book. There was also an experience in 81 where he had a similar experience in the hotel. You're saying it was the same night. Was there another time in 81 when he also had experienced this problem with ODing on pain pills?
Yeah, it happened a couple times. Yes.
But let's just put it like this, Barkan, because Todd Barkan, it was a musician in his own right and cultivated the hippest jazz club in the world. The cat that I'm working with on this project idolized you, man. Idolized you from a distance with the Turkish coffee. You brought in the baddest acts. Stan totally screws up the Saturday night, but the following evening, he just played transcendent music. Is that right? I mean, he was for all the headaches, he was what made him. I mean, I just got off the phone with Lalo Schifrin, okay?
Right.
Lalo said that Dizzy respected Stan because, like Charlie Parker, albeit different language, Stan had added his own language to the music of jazz. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Oh, absolutely. He I mean, our music is all about telling your own story in your own way. And whether it was Dexter Gordon or John Coltrane, who I actually heard John Coltrane in my presence talk about Stan Getz. Stan Getz was idolized by John Coltrane because, I mean, he had a sound. I mean, Coltrane loved Sonny Stitt playing tenor, but he equally loved him, even more probably, Stan Getz, because Stan Getz had so unmistakably a sound of his own. He told his own story in his own way. And that's what and Miles did likewise. I mean, these gentlemen, everybody across the board that I knew thought Stan Getz was the cat's meow, even if he was an asshole. He still, even if he was evil and pernicious and everything else bad.
Were you aware?
He could also be wonderful, and also, even as a human being, he showed incredible generosity to me. And then, and cheek and jowl with incredible selfishness. So, it was definitely not a simple story. There was a complexity to the situation that was quite remarkable, and I've only experienced that kind of dichotomy with a very few people.
I wanted to,
but it is part of it's maybe writ more large with a character like Getz, but it is part of a syndrome in the arts. I mean, Carl Jung wrote about it, over 100 years ago. I mean, it's part of a syndrome. I don't know when Jung wrote this, but that the artistic part of your character, of the artist's psyche, that part of the psyche bleeds the personal for the artistic, and that truer words have never been spoken. I mean, I used that quote in the liner notes for a Hank Mobley record. I mean, many years ago, but it holds as true today as ever, or even more so. I mean, and it's something that we have to. It's not that these people should literally get away with murder, but it's something we have to understand about the constitution of some artists. All artists, that is not the case, because I've dealt with some artists who remained as gentle and easygoing and as beatific. I mean, John Coltrane was quite like that. As Grover Washington Jr. was like that, just as nice as the day is long. But I mean, Bird had a little bit of an evil streak in him. I don't think it was as broad as Getz's was. But the thing is that it exists, and with Stan, it was more pronounced than I saw in almost any other person that I've ever dealt with in this music.
Talking to Todd Barkan here on the Jake Feinberg Show, and he's just as glib as ever. Can you talk about I can't remember the drug that were you aware of Monica's, I don't want to say diabolical, but there was some kind of, she would sprinkle this drug in his food that would make him horribly ill. Did you see him? Did you know the pain?
Yeah, I don't recall the name of this substance, but it was, at this moment, I don't recall the name, but it was something used with alcoholics that you would put it in there.
Antabuse.
Antabuse, yes. Dexter even wrote a tune by that name. Antabuse, she definitely did put it in his food. He did definitely get sick. and he was horrified by that. He used it as part of his case in the horribly bitter divorce case that ensued between Stan and Monica, which lasted. I mean, the ramifications and ill effects of it lasted up through Getz's demise.
Yeah.
Even though they did get divorced and Stan did find other partners in life, it was still a very, it was definitely the War of the Roses in terms of the fight. And that antabuse was a major bone of contention between the two of them.
I was going to say, I had Dr. Patrick Gleason come down for the interview because at the Keystone Korner, he relayed to me that after a gig, maybe possibly during that 78 run, there's Getz. Gleason had been commissioned by K-Jazz to write a tune for a commercial. And so he is like, well, great. I know Billy Hart. He's in the band. I'll bring him in. And it'd be great to get Stan to come in and do a solo over it. Well, the gig finishes at Todd Barkan's Keystone Korner, and Getz saddles right up to the bar to the most elegant, beautiful Nashira Priester, and he is hitting on her like no other. She wants nothing to do with him. But Stan was... the point is that eventually Stan actually made Gleason pick up his saxophone case before they went to cut the session, and then rambled on at a diner for 4 hours about himself. So, I mean, do you talk? It was so perfect, artist and autistic, but aside from the drugs, was he totally caught up in, once he became a pop star, he was a popular star in America. For a long time, he was one of the only cats that won a Grammy for improvisational music. Did he have an ego that, like most cats do when they get to that level, but combined with the good looks, can you talk about a story at the Keystone when he had 4 women at the table, they all thought that they were with him?
Well, I saw that happen, but I think that he was an Adonis of his time. He was a good-looking cat, and he played very romantic music, and he did have women that I don't know what the language prohibitions on this show was, but they were definitely star fuckers. Hovering around him at all times, but he was a very he was. But I didn't feel that was any more pronounced an element than I saw many times in the jazz world. He just happened to be quite a bit bigger star. I don't think he was a bigger star than Miles Davis, but he was a star, and he had his groupies, as did hundreds of other artists that I've known. Cedar Walton used to kind of very wryly observe. He said, even a homely guy like me, the Klieg lights, help me score every once in a while. So the bandstand, the Klieg lights, as Cedar so eloquently called them, the Klieg lights are, a real, do help you in that way. And so Stan did have more than his share of adoration from his fans. Not quite on the level of Frank Sinatra and Miles Davis, but he was this bona fide superstar. And to this day, his name is one of the best known household names of jazz, Stan Getz. And the Getz-Gilberto record, there were millions of babies made to that record.
Right.
And
no, I love what it was up there with What's Going On with Marvin Gaye. No, I mean,
that was a baby maker. That record.
Baby maker. Now, like Zeus,
it even supplanted. I mean, this guy's that record even supplanted "Hard Day's Night" on the charts of the Beatles for weeks. It was so popular. So more popular than the Beatles. It was outselling a huge Beatle record for a period of weeks. I mean, it didn't do it, all year or even more than a few months. But that's some indication of how popular that record was.
Can you talk about the African American? We got about 3 minutes here. I wanted you to talk about the way, Stan idolized, came from the Lester Young School and Dexter Gordon. Can you talk about the African American cats like Dizzy, what they said about Stan in regard to his playing, why they respected him?
Well, why they respected him, there's a wonderful story about when Stan was very nervous when he first met Lester Young, because obviously he did get great inspiration and artistic. He was artistically influenced profoundly by Lester Young, as he influenced John Coltrane. And Stan, met Perez at a drug dealer up in Harlem, and he was very nervous. And and Lester Young said to him, "Well, Stan said, 'Oh man, I'm real. You're one of my heroes.'" And and so Lester Young was very nonchalant because they're both getting high in the same place in Harlem. And he says to Stan very, very ingenuously, "Well, nice eyes, Lady Getz. Nice eyes."
I read that in the book. I love that. Nice eyes. He goes, keep going, man, and just walked away.
But they very much did. The cats were very respectful of Getz. They might not have personally liked him that much, but in some cases, they were those things didn't matter. Dexter and Stan. Actually, I have a wonderful picture from them hugging one another at the Keystone, because Stan didn't really, he had thought Dexter's sound was a little cold, but when he lived in San Francisco, he actually came and heard Dexter a few times, and he started to fall in love with Dexter's lyricism and depth and warmth, and they became fast friends and for the rest of their lives. And they had enormous respect because these guys played their own song in their own way. And even though Stan at first was put off by Dexter's sound, he eventually got to understand. And Dexter influenced Coltrane, but turned around to be influenced by Coltrane.
Brother Barkan,
and likewise, Dexter said that he drew inspiration from Getz as well as he did from Lester Young, and even though stylistically, they didn't have that many similarities, except a very original kind each in their own way, an original kind of melodicism, swinging melodicism, and which is the essence of this music as far as I'm concerned.
Well, my friend, we'll be coming to see you on video. You did. I can't thank you enough, Brother Barkan. You're the man, and thank you for taking the time today, brother. And you laid some great knowledge on us. I love you, bud. Thank you.
Well, as Rasan told us, bright moments.
Always, brother. Be good.
Okay.
Later on. And that's it. That's a wrap for the Jake Feinberg Show. Thanks to Mike Roper. We'll be back next week. Peace.
I've been playing blues for quite a while. I've been around the world a few times, but I don't understand. I just like to play the blues. It's not all the money that I want. I just like to play the blues. And I like for everybody to get together and all of us play the blues. Let's have a good time. Because blues is where it's at. I'm telling you, I love it. I can't help but play it. So when you wake up in the morning,
you're a gig,
and ain't got no money, or no gig, whatever you call it, you ain't got nothing but the blues no way, baby. Or either your old lady go do gagging you and arguing with you, blues a little bit.